All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Kearnan, and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martyn Sadler. And Martyn, news circulating everywhere at the moment. It seems like
Loads of it. Yeah.
One of the points we touched on in the last episode has been very prominent over the last week or so.
That's right.
But had some Challenge Cup action over the weekend. Did you get to catch any of it?
I saw the two games that were on the BBC coverage. Yeah, the whole derby, of course, which was fantastic. Although probably not quite as close as we would have liked, ideally. But I thought Hull KR were absolutely outstanding. And then the Warrington St Helens game, again, another outstanding game. Played by two very good sides.
Yeah.
So, there had to be a winner, of course, and it was Warrington.
Yeah, that's right. Well, how about we touch on some of those results? Obviously, Friday night we had Catalans defeating Salford 20 points to 12. Probably no real surprises here. I think Salford did a good job of keeping that scoreline, considering all the turmoil they've had.
I mean, what was surprising was that the score was reasonably close, and Salford obviously put up a very good show. Very sadly, though, it was Kallum Watkins' last game as a Salford player. He's moved to Leeds. We'll talk about that shortly, I would imagine. But, it's unfortunate that Salford are losing players like that. They've lost several key players. Obviously, Mark Sneed, Tim Lafai. You wonder what the future holds for them this season. But Catalans go through, but again, they're not giving convincing performances, are they? Unfortunately, I didn't see any of this game on TV. It wasn't covered, as far as I'm aware, by any TV company, so I missed the game, sadly. But, Catalans through to the semi-final, and they'll play Hull KR, which is quite a challenge for them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The other match-up on Friday, we had Leeds defeating Wakefield 20 points to 12.
Do you know,
Same scoreline.
It's a funny thing, but I anticipated this result, really. Wakefield can't win a game at home, and they win every game away. I mean, that's weird, isn't it? Yeah. It really is weird that they seem unable to win a home game. There's... have we to start a rumour that Wakefield are going to request that all their games should be now played away?
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, they get such a great crowd
from unnamed
to their
sources.
Games. Yeah. You think they'd have a significant advantage with the loud Wakefield fans?
Oh, you would, but unfortunately for them, I mean, it was a really tight game, but there were a couple of mistakes made by key players towards the end of the game that just allowed Lee to win it. And but I thought it's funny. I thought Lee would bounce back from two defeats. I had a discussion with Adrian Lamb last week, their coach, and was saying that that they had that great start, if you remember, by winning at Wigan 1-0. But I said to Adrian, you can't play at that level all the time. It's just not possible to be at your best every single week. Every club has ups and downs, and we've seen it with every club so far this season, haven't we? Apart from Hull KR, of course. Although even then they didn't play all that well right at the start, but they are playing very well now. But I just thought they'd bounce back, and one of the crucial things that they had against Wakefield last Friday was Robbie Mulhern coming back into the side, and I think he's a really crucial player, and should be considered for the by England for the Ashes series this year. If any league player is going to make that side, I think he ought to be the first in line.
And a great individual try scored by Tessie New, where he seemed to have shrugged off three or four defenders.
Yes, I think he's been a really great signing for Lee. And it's funny, because when he first appeared on the scene in Australia, I sort of thought of him as quite a slender sort of a guy. He didn't, but he's put on a lot of weight and looks much more solid now than he ever did when he was a lot younger. And I think he's playing really well for Lee, and I think Lee were back to the sort of form that could see them go all the way.
No, absolutely. It's always hard when you verse the same opponent twice. To win those two games.
Oh yeah,
the other team has a whole week of film to look back
That's
at with
right.
their mistakes.
Yes.
Credit to Lee for
and
bouncing
they strengthened,
back.
As we say. So good luck to Lee. It was a great win for them.
Then Saturday we had the Hull derby. Hull KR defeating Hull FC 32 points to 12.
I mean, that was really interesting, wasn't it? Because Mikey Lewis. People say Hull KR now revolve around Mikey Lewis, which is true to some degree, isn't it? Let's face it. But Mikey Lewis goes off after about 15 minutes or so, quite a serious-looking injury, hopefully not as serious as it looked at the time. And, you know, I imagine that every Hull FC fan in the stadium, and there were 20,000, more than 20,000 people there, their hearts must have leapt because they must have thought, right, you know, no Mikey Lewis, we're in with a great chance now. But Jez Litton came on, and actually I thought played a blinder. Jez Litton is a really good player, in my view. And again, I don't want to tell Sean Wayne how to pick his England team. Well, I do really, don't I?
Yeah.
I really do.
That's the job,
but
right?
That's the job, maybe. But, I mean, if Sean's watching, Jez Litton, Sean, ought to be certainly on your radar. It's shown what a great bench player he is because he can come on. If your hooker's injured, he can, you know, come and obviously do a job there. But if your halfbacks are injured, he's demonstrated that he can do a great job there. That sort of player with that sort of utility value could be really vital in an Ashes series against Australia. And he's such a such a great player, I think, is Jez Litton, that, you know, he ought to be. I mean, if there are better players than him, that's fine. Pick them, but I'm not sure that there are too many that fall into that category.
Yeah. If you didn't know any better and you just tuned into the game, you would have thought he was an experienced half leading that team. Oh, gosh,
yes. You certainly would.
Yeah, obviously the 9 on... Oh,
yeah.
Has he got the 9 on his jersey?
He has. He's got the 9 on, yeah.
That's right, so...
Mickey McIlorum... I mean, the other player who deserves enormous credit is Mickey McIlorum because he's now 37. And yet I think he played for the full 80 minutes because normally he would come off the field. I mean, the tactic that Willie Peters has adopted this year is to play McIlorum for the first 20 or 30 minutes and then bring Jez Litton on when the opposition's tiring. And Litton, of course, is very quick and speedy around the ruck and so on, so can take advantage of the slightest of openings. And that works really well for them. That's, you know, a great tactic. But obviously you've got to revise that when Litton had to come on to replace Lewis. And McIlorum played the whole game, and gosh, what a performance that was. You know, he's still got it. McIlorum just seems to, you know, grow older, but doesn't show much signs of, you know, the aging process as far as I can see.
Aging like a fine wine.
Well, that's what they say.
Yeah. No, it's great to see.
Yeah.
And then Sunday's match up, we had Warrington defeating St Helens 20 points to 12.
Well, again, what a great game that was. And, you know, and what a brilliant try it was by George Williams to win the game, you know, and George, but fed by Mark Sneyd. I mean, Mark Sneyd has made a significant difference to that Warrington side. He fed George gave the pass to George that allowed George to break through the Saints defence and score what, you know, was an absolutely peach of a match-winning try. We made it our try of the week in League Express, which, you know, obviously wasn't too surprising, and it put them through. But Warrington, you know, they're looking the goods. Mark Sneyd just seems to be, as far as I can see, the piece that was missing in the Warrington jigsaw. Now that, you know, that may be famous last words, and of course, you never quite know. You can't guarantee anything in rugby league, can you? So, you know, they might not fulfil the obvious potential that they've now got, but certainly they've got the inside track, as far as I can see. Yeah,
just that play where Sneyd sort of switched it back to Williams, and then Williams threw it back on the inside to Matt Duffy, who was sprinting onto it. You know, just great to see those three linking up.
They're playing really great rugby at Warrington at the moment, and you know, they look to be potential trophy winners this year, and quite a few teams do, don't they? Let's face it.
Yeah, it's a tight competition, that's for sure, mate. So only 4 matches there in the Challenge Cup to sort of discuss. Any
1895 Cup games
touch on
that we ought to mention? Well, we ought to, because there were some really quite interesting results, weren't there? The quarterfinals. Bradford Bulls beat Sheffield Eagles. Well, that was perhaps expected. Featherstone had a convincing win against London Broncos. Oldham getting through against Barrow. And York Knights hammering Widnes Vikings. Now, actually, the really interesting thing there, I think at least, is Oldham, because they're not going to make the semi-final draw until this coming Sunday. I understand, but Oldham have never been to Wembley. Oldham, have had periods when they've had a great team. In the 1950s, they won the championship final. They beat Hull at Manchester City's main road ground, I think it was. And they've come near on so many occasions, but they've never made it to Wembley. And I think if Oldham do get to Wembley this year, albeit in the 1895 Cup, I think they'll take quite a big crowd down with them. Yeah. Somewhat similar to Wakefield last year, because they've been waiting effectively since 1929 for a trip to Wembley, and it would be fantastic for all their fans to be able to go down. But we'll see, because whoever they get drawn against in the semi-final will not keel over.
Yeah, that's right. No, great to see. I'm sure Mike Ford will be happy if they can make their way down to Wembley. Now, mate, heaps of news to discuss this week. Obviously, we touched on it a little bit in last week's episode, but the NRL's interest in our competition seems to continue to grow. There was a Sydney Morning Herald article that I think went live yesterday.
Yes, that's right.
Discussing the NRL's interest. What's the latest?
It says that the NRL is going to consider a proposal to buy a 33% stake, a one-third stake, in Super League. But I wonder what that actually means. Does it mean that they will buy a one-third stake in Super League Europe Limited, the company that all the Super League clubs have a share in? And if they do, of course, it won't give them majority control, which I would have thought that they would want. But that article does say that they would get complete administrative control of the competition from 2028. Which seems odd to me, because I would have thought that if they're going to make that investment, they'd want control right from the start. So it's a bit mysterious. And, of course, it comes back to this thing about, a 10-team competition that would include the two French clubs, Catalans and Toulouse, and 8 others. And I'm just so unsure about all of this, because I'm just not certain that the NRL really understands the history and the culture and the structure of the British game. And I don't think it necessarily understands the problems that the British game faces in relation to the popularity of other sports, obviously mainly football, but other sports too in this country, which isn't quite the same thing as you find in Australia, of course. But having said that, financial windfall would always be welcome for the clubs, but I think if it does come about, we need a restructuring. I've said so many times before on this podcast, Jake, that we need a governance structure where the competition comes to the forefront, like Major League Soccer, for example. Major League Soccer is my ideal structure of governance, where the competition comes before the clubs, and at the moment our clubs come before the competition, given the way that we're structured here. The thing that's quite interesting as well is that it says that this all this stems from Wigan owner Mike Danson and Warrington owner Simon Moran speaking to Peter Vlandis and Andrew Abdo in Las Vegas, in late February, early March, when they were all out there, when Wigan and Warrington were playing in Vegas. And it also says that the main proponents in Australia are West Tigers Chief Executive Shane Richardson and South Sydney Chief Executive Blake Solly, who have both spent time over here. Shane Richardson at the Hull Club and Blake Solly at the RFL some years ago. And both of them, I think, are probably, it's fair to say, not really enamoured of Nigel Wood, who's been brought back as a Rugby Football League director recently and who will be heading the the review of the game that's being carried out prior to the next RFL Council meeting in July. Mm-hmm. So it's a really complex situation, Jake. Yeah. A lot of personal feelings are going to come into this. I know Shane, as I've said, Shane and Blake are not known to be enamoured with Nigel. And I suppose it would be fair to say that Nigel probably might not be enamoured by them. So who knows what the future holds? But and of course we've got the fact is that we're going to have to be negotiating a new TV contract soon because we're in the second year of a 3-year deal. So our new TV contract runs from 2027. That's one thing the article gets wrong, actually. It does say from 2028. It's actually from 2027, the new Super League TV deal. So there's got to be a lot of thought going into how to structure that deal and what offer Super League will be making to the potential broadcasters. And I noticed, by the way, that at last week's match between South Sydney and Sydney Roosters, the NRL had a presence at that game with a guy who is I've forgotten his name now, but the chief executive of DAZN, the company that bought Foxtel recently. And DAZN might potentially be in the market for rugby league in this country, I would think, particularly if the NRL can take control. So there's a lot that's up in the air at the moment, Jake, and in one sense that makes it exciting, but in another sense it makes it uncertain. You know, you're combining excitement with uncertainty. You know, it's a bit like on the international scene at the moment with all the tariffs and everything that are being put on things by Donald Trump. It creates uncertainty, but you never quite know how the card's going to fall after all of that.
Yeah. It's a tough one. It's raised a lot of questions, Martyn, and one's about what would a competition restructure look like under or with the NRL's help. There's been the idea of 10 teams being touted. I would much rather we keep the system we have now and add to it.
Well, so would I. I think 14 teams is better than... And I would go further. I would go to 16 teams. Because I think small leagues... I've got a theory that you need at least 16 teams to generate sufficient widespread interest, and you need variation within those 16 teams. You don't want the same team winning every year, or the same few teams winning every year. I mean, the NRL now has 17 teams, and we were getting to the point where it was becoming repetitive that Penrith were winning, wasn't it? This is the greatest NRL season for many years, partly because Penrith have only won one of their first 5 games, and the Bulldogs are at the top of the league undefeated. They will get great support if they carry on winning. So you need a constant turnover of successful sides if your competition is going to maximise its potential.
Yeah.
And I think that's happening in Australia now.
Oh, definitely.
But and to some degree, it's happening here because Hull KR are top of the league undefeated as well. That's absolutely marvellous, and that's not to gloat at Wigan not being at the top of the league. But we don't want the same team to be winning everything all the time. And I'm sure even Wigan fans will probably see the sense of that. If the same team wins everything, it becomes repetitive.
Well, no one's going to show up to the games when they know what the final results are going to be.
That's the thing. You've got to find ways of cutting out the blowout scorelines. That's really important as far as I'm concerned.
Now, one of the key things that they've reported on in the article, I believe, is that the NRL's interest sort of depends on those French teams being included.
And a London team.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so that would include, obviously, Toulouse as well. Now, there's reports that there's 6 Super League clubs that are on board with a potential NRL proposal of this 10-club format. But it's sparked debate online, I guess, the French team's inclusion. We spoke about it last week. We're obviously in favour. Do you think it just seems like the clubs at this point are the only people in the whole rugby league community that don't want to see the French teams in the competition?
Well, I don't. I think that's been exaggerated. I think that there are perhaps one or two clubs. What some clubs have said is that the French teams don't bring a financial benefit to Super League. But that's not the same as saying they don't want the French clubs in. You've got to bear that in mind. And the thing is, as long as the French clubs are there is the potential for them to bring, a financial benefit to the game, as well as the potential to improve the French national side. That hasn't happened in the way that we would have hoped. But there are now probably more young French players playing at a good level, both within Super League and within the Championship, than we've seen for an awful long time. But the Catalans can't, single-handedly produce a great French national team. That's just beyond ridiculous to think that could happen. But the French do bring benefits. But the problem is with France. And the reason why they can't get a good TV deal, or one of the main reasons, is that the French Rugby Union still has a consuming hatred of rugby league and a determination to make sure that rugby league doesn't expand, and in fact, a determination to kill it off. They're really venomous and absolutely horrible as far as I'm concerned. And of course, if we kicked the Catalans and Toulouse out of our competitions, we'd be playing right into their hands, wouldn't we? That's something that I would certainly not want to do. I mean, I'm the sort of person, if I see somebody having that attitude towards our sport, then my reaction is to want to hit back at them, and to demonstrate that actually our sport is far better than theirs, which I'm obviously convinced that it is. So no, my reaction would be to strengthen the French teams, get both French teams into Super League, and that would then at least give you a better chance of getting a broadcasting deal in France, because if you've got two teams in Super League, covering a significant part of the country, then you've got more chance of being able to negotiate a deal, even despite the threats that the French Rugby Union would issue to the broadcasters because of that. So, who knows? Who knows what the future holds? But I'm certainly, I'm not convinced. We've said earlier that the some of the Super League clubs don't value the French, and of course the French clubs don't bring much money into Super League. That you can't dispute that, but that's a far cry from saying that they shouldn't be there at all, as I've already said. So, I think that's a bit of a red herring, if I'm honest about it.
And the argument seems to be that obviously they don't take travelling fans, they don't bring them over to the UK. But I mean, I guess when you compare it to the fans that travel to the south of France, and why wouldn't you want to go there for an away game, right? It's beautiful weather. It's a good weekend away.
It's a great place, yeah. France is the most beautiful country in the world, in my opinion. But that's only my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. I guess you can't blame their fans for not wanting to come up to a cold and a windy game at Hull, or a cold and windy game.
Although it's not always cold and windy. I mean, I just defend England for a moment.
Yeah.
In the middle of summer, it can be really beautiful. So
the last three weeks have been great, haven't they?
Yeah, of course they have. Yeah.
So,
just because you come from Queensland, where it's actually too hot, mate. So for me anyway, in the middle of summer.
I was talking to friends the other day, and I said, for the last 3 weeks, this is probably the most consistent sun I've seen, given the last 2 summers I have spent a lot of time travelling through Europe. I don't think I've seen this much sun in Manchester for quite a while. So
absolutely,
it might be the most I've seen, mate. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there over the coming weeks. It makes me wonder whether this review we're doing into the RFL and the way it's run, the competition, the way it's run, is it worth doing until we know what the NRL's interests
Well,
are?
I'm sure that they will. I'm sure that Nigel Wood will already know what the NRL's interest is. But what we're keen to find out is what his reaction to it will be. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, we'll
as
sit
well
tight.
as the other clubs. I mean, one of the most influential club owners, of course, is Derek Beaumont, who's a great guy in my opinion. But every time you read anything about the Australian interest in buying into Super League, Lee don't seem to get a mention. Well, believe me, that will go down like a lead balloon with Derek, won't it?
Yeah, that's right. That's it. That's why I think, we should keep the same format and just add to it. But,
Oh, no doubt about it. No doubt whatsoever.
Yeah. Oh, we'll see. Like we said, between now and this time next week, I'm sure there'll be a few new developments, as there was between last week's episode and this one. So we'll discuss it all next week. But it leads me to the next point, mate. The future of the London Broncos is meant to be a major event sort of taking place at the Australian High Commission next Tuesday.
That's right.
Big announcement. I think Gary Hetherington's going down.
Yes, he's been very much involved in this.
What do you think it's going to be about?
What I think it will be a statement about London Broncos and rugby league in the southeast of England. And I think they'll be announcing some new investment into the club coming from Australia. Whether it'll be coming from one of the Australian NRL clubs or not, I'm not absolutely sure. Gary's keeping that close to his chest because he wants to announce it actually on the Tuesday. I've been invited down, and I hope you have been as well. I don't know if you have been yet, but
we'll see,
as an Aussie, you ought to be at the Australian High Commission, mate.
I'll just be peeking over the fence, mate.
No, you'll be there in the middle of it. Yeah, you ought to be there in the middle of it. So we'll see what comes of that. But it's potentially very exciting news. Obviously for London Broncos, and hopefully it means that they'll stay at their existing stadium at Wimbledon, and hopefully go from strength to strength. That would be great, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely, mate. And especially if they are going to be re-added to a new format in the coming years, they want to have that strong financial backing and good partnerships with Australian investors. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I know there seems to be a lot of encouragement at the moment with NRL clubs and Super League clubs trying to strike partnership deals.
Yes.
I'm sure we'll see more news around that.
Yes, I mean, depends. It always depends what we mean by a partnership deal, doesn't it? What I think the thing that slightly concerns me, I've got to say, is that the NRL, they keep talking about expansion. Obviously, with the PNG side is coming in 2028. Perth seems to have stalled at the moment, but who knows what's going to happen there. And, they're obviously looking for more players to be able to play in the NRL from a much wider geographical area, including this country. So, I'm just a bit worried that some of our, younger players will all head over to the NRL. We've seen Matty Nicholson go over and play very well for Canberra Raiders. There's already a significant group of English players playing in the NRL. But I don't want to lose all our best players to the NRL.
You don't want it to be like a funnel of talent.
No, I don't want this to be a feeder competition. Effectively for the NRL.
Yeah, that's fair enough, mate. We'll wait and see what happens. The other thing you touched on in your column in League Express this week, mate, the Ashes ticket sales seem to be going pretty well.
Yes, 75,000 apparently have been sold. I think there are probably, if you add them all up, there's 90,000 at Wembley, about 52,000 at Everton, and just under 20,000 at Leeds. So that makes about 160,000 tickets to be sold altogether. If it's going to be a sold out series, and to have already sold 75,000, which is almost half, before they go on general sale, which they will do next Monday, I believe, Monday the 14th. All the tickets so far have been sold to people who registered for early sales privileges. So that's a remarkably positive thing, and it sort of proved me wrong, because I thought with such a late announcement of the Ashes series, it might make tickets difficult to sell. But clearly not. And I think what's really quite important is it sort of shows how good it is to not have Ashes series too regularly. You know, we've not had one since 2003, and it's 22 years.
Yeah.
People have been, crying out for it, haven't they?
That's it. And that, I guess, delayed announcement, you might say, it's probably created a sense of FOMO, fear of missing out.
Yes.
So maybe a sense of urgency to go and register for those
Absolutely.
tickets.
Well, Headingley's been sold out already.
Yeah.
The third test is completely sold out, which is amazing, isn't it? And it is worth bearing in mind that in 2003, when they came, the total sales was just under 75,000 at that time. So the sales have already surpassed the total sales for 2003.
That's great.
Which is, very positive, isn't it?
And yeah, as we said, once general admission goes on sale, we'll have a better idea of where we stand. But great early signs, that's for sure, mate. Now, been a little bit of transfer news over the last week or so. Kallum Watkins, we obviously touched on that. Going to Leeds. There's been a lot of chatter over the last few weeks, but it's finally a done deal.
Yes, I mean, Kallum is now 34, so, is obviously in the latter stages of his career, but I think still a really good player. And I think he'll be an enormous benefit to Leeds and a great loss to Salford. And it's so disappointing to see players leaving Salford, isn't it, really? Let's face it. And, this Salford business needs to get sorted out, and their salary cap problem needs to be sorted out as soon as possible. And again, the frustrating thing is that none of us really know what's going on there. We keep being told that it's going to be sorted and that they'll be financially stable very soon. It seems to be linked to the sale of the stadium to the people who have actually bought the club, and that seems to be going through as far as I'm aware. But who knows what the hell's going on? Yeah,
it's a worrying time, mate, because it doesn't seem like we're getting much communication from the owners.
No, we're not, and we're not from the club itself.
That's it. And I think the club itself is getting a little bit frustrated with having to obviously deal with all the media requests, first of all, but also just the
Chris Irwin came in as the new chief executive. He's very inexperienced, and I've tried to make contact with him, and not. He's not got back to me, which is a bit frustrating and slightly annoying, if I'm really honest about it. So you wonder what the hell is going on there.
And the other news for them, Nene McDonald, he's on loan to Oldham, had his first game on the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, that's just it's ridiculous that he is a Salford player but can't play for Salford because of the salary cap limit that's been imposed on them. What's the point of a salary cap limit when Salford still have to keep paying those players anyway? All it does is weaken them and weaken the competition, and I can't see that it does anybody any good.
Can you believe we're going into the 8th week of Super League now?
Yes.
And he hasn't played a match this season.
Isn't that ridiculous?
You can't blame him for wanting to go get a game in somewhere else.
No, and I mean, he'll be terrific for Oldham, won't he? Let's face it. He's a great player. Yeah. But it's immensely frustrating that this Salford situation hasn't been sorted out many months ago. Not just now, but many months ago. And it shows how weak the RFL has been, in my view, not being able to actually reach a solution as they should have been able to.
Yeah, it's bizarre. And I assume it'll take him a few games to get his match fitness and I guess used to playing football again. So
yeah.
But great to have that experience around Oldham. I'm sure he'll be a huge benefit for the stint that he's there. Now, we touched on it a little bit earlier, mate, but NRL news, the Penrith Panthers, they've lost 4 in a row.
Yes.
Can you believe it?
No, but I'm not unhappy about that, Jake, for reasons I said earlier. I mean, Penrith, looked to me as though they were going to win a bit like Wigan in England. Penrith looked to be the team that was going to win everything almost permanently, because apart from anything else, they've got such a great feeder system into their club. But they lost Jerome Luai, didn't they, this year? And, the partner to Nathan Cleary. And that looks to be a crucial loss, doesn't it?
Also say like Fisher Harris as well, going to the Warriors.
Fisher Harris, yeah, what a great player.
Yeah. So they've, as you said, they've always had this great talent pool coming through, but I think we're starting to see the way the salary cap's working. You know, it's so hard for a team to remain on the top. They've lost so many players over the last few years.
Yeah.
You know, Kickow, Burton, Luai, Taruva, Fisher Harris. You know, they're no names.
You can't keep losing players. And this is where the salary cap works, doesn't it, really? Because the salary cap has forced them to, you know, let players go. And of course, they don't have a marquee player rule in Australia, which I'm surprised by, actually. But nobody seems to be pressing for it, whereas we do have 3 marquee players per club, potentially. So, you know, that's the best sort of guarantee that we're not going to lose all our top players to Australia, I think.
That's it. And it's not just players that they've lost coaches. And we look at Cameron Ciraldo, the opposite end of the scale. Bulldogs remain undefeated at the top of the ladder. I think that's probably came as a little bit of a surprise to me. I thought they'd be a finals contending team, but the top of the table after 5 matches.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's great to see.
And they'll still be top at the weekend because they've got the bye this week, haven't they?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And then the other news I saw, mate, Adam Reynolds. Looks like he's been linked with Hull KR over the last week or so.
Yeah, well, again, you know, at the moment he forms the oldest halfback partnership in the NRL, doesn't he? But who knows? You know, he is still a really good player. He's a Mark Sneed type player, as far as I'm concerned. Great kicking game. Very, very calm individual. Takes charge of his team, you know, going around the pitch and so on. He'd be a great... And obviously at Hull KR, Tyrone May is probably going to go back to Australia at the end of this year. So to have Adam Reynolds, even for one season, to play alongside Mikey Lewis, that'd be a really attractive combination, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And due to salary cap pressures, it's going to be hard for the Broncos to retain him. But as a Broncos fan, I want them to do everything they can to keep him in our side. He's such an important
South Sydney
part.
made such a mistake in letting him go, didn't they, 2 or 3 years ago? But he's a real great player. Talks very well about the game as well. And Hull KR, you've got to say that Willie Peters' recruitment policy, he's really sharp. You know, if Willie Peters isn't afraid to make changes to his squad, but every change he makes seems to improve it. You know, unlike, you know, at some other places, but. You've got to, if Willie Peters wants Adam Reynolds, you can be sure that Adam Reynolds will strengthen Hull KR next year.
Yeah, no, absolutely, mate. And the other news, it sort of leads on from the South Sydney mistake. They've got Lewis Dodd. His best chance of making his NRL debut was going to be this weekend, but unfortunately, looks like he's going to face a suspension due to a crusher tackle in New South Wales Cup.
Again, I'd not read that. Yeah.
No, so it looks like Souths are going to have a halves partnership of Bud Sullivan and Latrell Mitchell. So
yeah, things haven't gone well for Lewis Dodd, have they? No. You know, he got a suspension initially, and now he's got another one, it seems. So, and apparently he played quite well for the reserve grade side, didn't he?
Yeah, it's a real shame. He might be one of the most unluckiest players to sign with a club in the NRL, but
hopefully that won't affect his confidence too much. But you never know, do you?
That's it. But yeah, we'll wait and see what happens there. I'm sure his time will come eventually, but just bide your time in the New South Wales Cup for the time being.
Oh,
his opportunity will come. All right, mate, do we want to touch on any other news topics before we get into this weekend's matchups?
Well, one thing that I would say, we just looking at League Express, the front cover shows Joe Burgess and Elliot Minchella celebrating Hull KR's win over Hull in the Challenge Cup derby at the weekend. Just say one thing about Elliot Minchella, which I actually said to Willie Peters yesterday on the Hull KR press conference, Zoom conference. I was watching the Warrington St Helens game on TV. I actually caught up with it on Monday. And Elliot Minchella was one of the pundits, and he's been with the BBC a couple of times and with Sky as well. And I've got to say, he is very impressive when he talks about the game. He's a real smart kid and gives tremendous insights into the game. He's very calm and considered and speaks so well about it. And, I think he's got a terrific future. I mean, Willie Peters was saying he could potentially be a great coach when he eventually retires. But he could also be a great media guy as well. And funnily enough, Joe Burgess, who is on the photograph with him, it's interesting actually because Joe, whenever Joe's interviewed, he is so amusing. He's a very engaging guy to talk about the game as well. And it's interesting. Willie Peters was saying, at Hull KR, they've got a philosophy that sort of develops all their players, not just as rugby league players, but as human beings, so to speak, as well. They want them all to be good husbands, good members of society, and generally people who have got great confidence in themselves, and that's showing when you see a lot of their players at the moment. They speak really well for themselves, the Hull KR players. Yeah. And I'm sure the same is true at other clubs as well. I was talking to Dean Hadley yesterday, and, Dean, who's another player, by the way. I mean, Dean Hadley's had a remarkable career at Hull KR because he was at Hull FC for several years and never quite broke through to be the first team regular that he perhaps would have liked to have been. But now he is... he played 30 games for Hull KR last season, and I think if anybody should be an outside chance for England selection, it should certainly be Dean Hadley.
Yeah, well, it's full credit to the culture they've got at Hull KR.
Great culture. I think they've got a fantastic culture, and they're not the only club like that. Wigan are very much the same, and several other clubs as well. But it shines out at Hull KR, and I think it's great to see their players, being interviewed on Sky or the BBC or whatever it is, and speaking so well.
Yeah, no, it's great exposure for him as well. I'm sure Minchella, he'll have his pick of what he wants to do once he retires. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. All right, mate, this weekend's matchups. Thursday, we have Salford taking on Leeds. Who do you like in this one?
Well, you've got to like Leeds, haven't you? I'm afraid. Yeah. It's a shame to say that, unfortunately, I can only see one result here. And the game's on Sky, so we'll see what happens. But again, it's one of those Thursday night games that threatens to have a relatively small crowd, and I wish they'd put Thursday night games that were maybe a bit bigger, really, so that they could draw a full house. But Salford, Salford, you've got to give them so much credit for battling against the odds, but I just can't quite see them beating Leeds, unfortunately.
Yeah, and might see Kallum Watkins, his first match for Leeds.
Yes,
against Salford.
Yes, I assume that there was not a clause in that transfer that prevented him from playing against his former club, so I assume we will see that. Yeah.
Friday's matchups, we have St Helens taking on Wakefield.
Oh, well, got to be a Wakefield win, isn't it? Yeah. Wakefield are away.
Away, yeah.
No, but this might be the first away game that they lose, of course. You can't quite see them. I can't quite see them winning at St Helens. I think St Helens will be smarting from that Challenge Cup defeat, and they will want to get back on the horse very quickly. So I think it's looking like a St Helens win there, but you never know. Wakefield are a strange side. They've won at various places this year that they weren't supposed to win at, starting at Leeds, of course, then at Warrington. So don't write them off.
Yeah. Then we've got the blockbuster of the round, Hull KR taking on Wigan.
Yes, that's a really interesting game, and Wigan are coming into it having had a week off, so they will, their players will have been rested, and they'll have been focusing on this game for 2 weeks, whereas Hull KR will have obviously not been able to do that. Oh God, I find this game incredibly difficult to predict.
Looks like there's going to be no Mikey Lewis for Hull KR.
No, Mikey. Oh, there won't be. No, Mikey Lewis won't play. But Jez Litton will presumably play. In his place, and who knows what the situation will be. But because of Mikey Lewis's absence, I think I'll stick my neck out and say I think Wigan might just edge it.
Yep. Saturday's matchups, we have Warrington taking on Hull FC.
Well, you can only see Warrington winning this game, can't you? Particularly given their recent form since Mark Sneyd joined them. And Hull FC have still got quite a lot of injury problems, actually, Jake. So, despite their... And Hull didn't play that badly in the Challenge Cup against Hull KR, but they were just beaten by a better side. But I think Warrington will also be a better side this Saturday against them as well. And I think they'll win... probably reasonably convincingly.
Yep. Then we have Castleford taking on Leigh.
Well, I can't really see Castleford winning this game. Yeah. It's a late kick-off on Saturday, 8 o'clock kick-off, which is quite an unusual time.
Especially for a Saturday.
Yeah,
you see that on Friday nights, don't you?
Yes, that's right. That's right. It's it is unusual, but I can't quite see. I just can't quite see Castleford not winning, to be honest, and Leigh not winning, and I think Leigh could be on another roll going right up towards the Challenge Cup semi-finals.
And Sunday's matchup, the final game of the round, we have Huddersfield taking on Catalan.
Well, I keep saying Huddersfield are not as bad as they look. I mean, they're 6 games, 0 points. But I think I've learnt a bitter lesson so far this season, and that is not to tip Huddersfield to win a game.
Yeah.
Because you're always proved wrong.
You watch they'll win this weekend.
Yeah, well, I think I'll tip Catalans, but I'd be very happy to see Huddersfield getting off the mark.
Yeah.
Put it that way.
No, they've been a bit unlucky too with injuries. So.
Yeah, but I think Sam Tompkins might have a bit too much in his armoury for them,
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Well, it's set to be a interesting weekend of matchups. Yeah, I can't wait. Anything else you want to touch on?
Well,
we
just mentioned the Challenge Cup semi-final draw and venues. We've got Hull KR v Catalans will be on the Saturday at York, which is an interesting selection, isn't it? Yeah. A very small stadium, only 8,500 people can get into the York Stadium. Which is, arguably, it shouldn't be big enough for a semi-final, should it, really? But obviously Catalans won't bring that many people, so it will be probably sold out with Hull KR fans, I would think.
Yep.
I'm surprised they've gone to York because of the size of the stadium, though. And it sort of says a lot, doesn't it, about about the Challenge Cup and its lack of drawing power, really. The other game, Warrington and Leigh, is hard to predict. That will be at St Helens on the Sunday, and but we could conceivably have a Leigh versus Hull KR Challenge Cup final again for the second time in 3 years.
Yeah, that'd be bizarre, wouldn't it?
It would, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm sure they'd try and take heaps of fans down to Wembley for it. I was just thinking though, the Catalans match, would they have been better off trying to maybe hold that at Wimbledon, the London Stadium?
Well, there might have been, yeah.
I was thinking it might be it's probably more so, a quick flight for Catalans and
but obviously not as many Hull KR fans would have made it down to there. I mean, for Hull KR fans, it's a fairly short trip to York, so I suppose they're thinking it'll sell out on that basis.
Yeah, true. No, interesting. All right, mate. We'll wrap it up here. I'm sure there'll be plenty of news over the next week or so to discuss next week. But we'll finish up here, eh?
Okay, awesome. Great to have seen you for another week, Jake, and we'll meet again next week.
Awesome. Take care, mate. Cheers.